Today we're talking about the Ravens 2024 season, based on the initial 53-man cutdown. We'll talk about every position, every player, coaching changes, and I'll even give my thoughts about fantasy football along the way. Roll the open. Welcome to Shut Up Football. I'm Jeff Stoltzfus. That's Kevin. Today we're talking about the Ravens, and quick disclaimer, I am not a Ravens expert. I am fairly new to the team as a fan. I'm an Eagles fan, first and foremost, always have been, but I've been living in Maryland for like a decade, so a couple years ago I decided to take on the Ravens as my second favorite team, my AFC team of choice, and making videos like this really helps me get to know the team and become more of a fan. Last year I went to a game and it was crazy fun. So if you want to learn a little about the Ravens too, come along, I'll take you with me. So let's start at the top. John Harbaugh is still the coach. He's the second longest tenured head coach in the league, just 1 year behind Mike Tomlin, really. His record is 171 and 108. They've made the playoffs 11 seasons and they even won one Super Bowl. Do you remember? I remember. They also have Todd Monken as their OC, who's now in his second year as the OC. Last year, they ranked 6th in offensive grade, whatever that's worth. They were top in the league for rushing, bottom in the league for passing, and that feels less like... It felt more like they were trading, you know? They ran so much they were trading some of the offensive air yards they could get. Lamar runs a lot. And also, I feel like things kind of changed when Mark Andrews got injured at the end of the year. Defensively, Mike Macdonald left to go to become the head coach of the Seahawks. Good luck to you, Mike. Zach Orr is now the new defensive coordinator. He is a former linebacker from the Ravens, former assistant for the Ravens. He was a linebackers coach with the Jags and the Ravens. He's an in-house promotion. He's 32 years old. It's going to be a lot of the same players in a lot of the same scheme, or at least that's what everyone is predicting, though they do expect him to be slightly more aggressive than McDonald was. In 2023, the Ravens were 22nd in blitzing, so a little more aggressive, a little more blitzing there wouldn't necessarily mean a huge change for them defensively, but they could probably stand a little bit more blitzing. This offseason, the departures were J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, who left to the Chargers. They traded Harbaugh's for some reason. That was a thing. Patrick Queen left to the Steelers, which seemed like a little bit of an FU from Queen, but I mean, I guess he finally hit. He finally became something, and he got paid and went away. So good luck, Queen, I guess, just not when you play the Ravens. In free agency, they got Derrick Henry, which I feel like is huge. I feel like even though he's older now, that's still huge, especially considering what they've had in the backfield for a while now. So their draft, I absolutely loved their draft. Just top to bottom, I probably liked it better than my Eagles draft, to be honest. They got a lot of good players at a lot of good value. They just let the draft come to them, and that's really the best way to go. I don't like when people go into a draft reaching or forced to make deals. They added to a lot of positions of need without reaching, and that's a big deal. To the offense, quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson, I mean, he plays darn near MVP level every other year. Last year, he had the most completions, most attempts in his career. He had 3,000 yards. That's not right. He had 3,800 yards, which was not a huge number when it comes to QBs. Usually 4,000 is a bit of a marker. 5,000 is a much bigger marker. But for Lamar Jackson, that's a pretty big number. That was the most in his career. He had 821 rushing yards, slightly higher than the previous 2 years, third most in his career. He's a stud in fantasy. He's got MVP potential every year. Even with what I would debate is perhaps a thin wide receiver core. But Mark Andrews is back. And he's about one of the few quarterbacks in the league, even though he doesn't throw for as many passing yards as a lot of other guys, that you feel like can go toe-to-toe with Mahomes. So that feels like a big deal. The backup quarterback situation, was listed as Josh Johnson, who's 38 years old. He's been on 14 different NFL teams. That's more than Ryan Fitzpatrick. Plus, he's been in the UFL and XFL. That's a lot. So, tons of experience. Yay. But I really have no confidence in him as a backup. Not that you want to see your backup quarterback on the field to begin with, but Lamar has been dinged up from all his running and all that. So, it's a possibility that we may need a starter besides Lamar for a game or two. Hopefully not much. Or even if it's just a series or two. You want to make sure the whole thing doesn't fall apart. So it was strange to see on the initial 53-man cut down only two QBs, or it was to me. I feel like we're a little bit past that now in the modern NFL, especially now with the new rule that you can dress a third. I'm surprised they didn't have a third one really to keep, but they didn't. It seemed like it was Lamar Jackson and a drifter, basically, because Josh Johnson is like Kane from Kung Fu. He's just wandering the earth, wandering the NFL landscape. It made zero sense to me. And what I was going to say, and what probably most of you were already pounding on your computer desks or whatever saying is, well, they should have gone out and gotten Tyler Huntley. The Browns were going to let him go anyway, most likely. That's what I was thinking. And then that's what happened. So the Browns cut Tyler Huntley, who was already with the Ravens before. He's back now. And that makes a lot more sense to me. Lamar, Tyler, then Josh. I feel a lot better about the whole backup situation at that point. Not that Tyler Huntley is going to change, the entire season, but I feel a lot more confident about the backup situation with him there. Practice squad, they also have quarterback Devin Leary, who was a 6th-round pick out of Kentucky. I personally didn't have strong feelings about Devin Leary. I didn't think he was worth having, but I don't know, he had a strong arm or something. He had good stats, I think, at Kentucky. So some people liked him going into the draft a little bit, but apparently Ravens fans don't seem to like him very much. I guess he threw some interceptions this preseason. So he's on the practice squad. Perhaps he is the new Trace McSorley. Running backs, Derrick Henry is now in-house. He is 30 years old. There are going to be obvious concerns about Derrick Henry, and it's twofold. So 30 years old, you expect that's when the running back cliff comes. That's what people say. Based on evidence, it seems to happen a lot. It's few that escape that. So you worry about the running back cliff that he could fall off this year. For me, I'm maybe slightly more concerned, but not that much, about durability concerns. And I'll explain why in a second. But so let's just get to what he had last year. He had the second most rushing yards last year, 7.6 yards per attempt still. So he's still good. He's still a horse. Compliment. That's a compliment. After contact, he gets 3.3 more yards after contact. So yeah, saddle up. And now I'm not too concerned about his durability because of the past. It's more just a guess for the future. In the past, he had a foot fracture in 21. He had a hip strain in 2022. He's only missed about 10 games in his whole career, I believe. So he's been pretty durable. That's not why I say I think there's durability concerns. It's more the mileage. So last year, he had 280 rushing attempts, which was the most. It's not even a career high. He's had as high as 350 before. So in his career, he's had over 2,000 rushing attempts. So there's concern about the age and the amount of wear left on him because he's a big dude and he hits hard, and that's how you get those 3.3 yards after contact. However, one of the things that could alleviate that with the Ravens that he didn't have previously is Lamar's running. Lamar might alleviate his workload with all the scurrying about that he does, so maybe he could take the workload off of him a bit, and we don't have to worry about that. Backup running back Justice Hill, still there, back again on a cheap deal. Good idea for the Ravens, especially after they let two of their other running backs go. Justice Hill's now 26 years old. He's never really been that big of a contributor. He's not a bad player by any means, but I talked about that second running back tier when I was talking about the Eagles with Kenneth Gainwell, and I kind of feel like that's kind of where Justice Hill is too. You're never going to really want him in fantasy. He's good for the team, but he's not going to be a huge contributor. A couple plays here and there. He's rotational play. He has speed. I love his speed. He's got toughness as far as what I can tell. I think his speed complements Henry. That's a good thing. He's not worth a roster spot even in fantasy football in your deep leagues to me. Third running back on the list is Rasheen Ali. He is a 5th-round rookie pick out of Marshall, and he had a lot of production at Marshall. You can look at that as maybe big fish, little pond in a way. It's a smaller school, but he had a lot of good production there. He's got really good metrics all around. I can see why they would have been interested in drafting him. He's got similar size and metrics actually to Justice Hill. So maybe in the future, if Hill ends up leaving after this year, Ali takes over for him there. My prediction, very little this year, very little for the future, honestly, for Ali. I don't think he has RB1 potential. Even if Henry gets injured, I still think he's just going to mix in with Hill. Next year, maybe he replaces Hill, but then you got to also consider Keaton Mitchell, who is still there, and I will get to him in a second. I think Ali is just good depth for the Ravens. Not a bad player. He's a fantasy pass for me. They took Ali at the end of the 5th, and the Chargers, the alternate Harbaugh, took Kamini Vidal at the top of the 6th. Similar in a way that he's a small school guy with a lot of upside. If you're going to play the long game with one of those two guys in Dynasty, and I know most drafts are done already, I would have gone Vidal. I think he's got a lot more upside, but it is what it is. So I don't know why the Ravens didn't take Vidal. They must have seen something they liked more in Rasheen Ali, but I don't. Ravens fans, am I wrong? Do you like Rasheen Ali? Is there something I'm missing about this dude? Please tell me. I'd love to know. Convince me of Rasheen Ali. That sounds like fun. Keaton Mitchell, who I absolutely loved, even as a UDFA. Holy cow, that dude is electric. He's lightning. He's fantastic, and I feel bad that he got injured last year because we only got to see a little bit of what he can do. He's still currently on the PUP. He's on the PUP, so that means at least 4 games he will not be in this year. He tore his ACL. That is a big deal. If you have Keaton Mitchell in fantasy and you're thinking, I'll only miss 4 games and then he's back, I mean, it takes a while for guys to return from an ACL injury, and they're not right for really, I think, a year. That's just my personal opinion. Take a look at Javonte Williams. Last year, he came back. He was okay. He wasn't quite what he was. I actually think Javonte is going to be very big this year. I think it just takes a little extra time, effort, whatever, to come back from such a serious injury. So Keaton Mitchell, still love him for the Ravens. I think he's just a stash in Dynasty. He'll contribute this year, but it's not going to be what we thought it was, or what I thought it was going to be going into last year. And I think it'll be next year before he really pops again. I'd love to be wrong. I think he's a fantastic player. But practice squad has running backs Chris Collier and John Kelly, and that's a nothing burger. Wide receiver Zay Flowers, who honestly was my favorite wide receiver going into the draft last year. And I knew there were deficiencies or whatever you want to call him in terms of he's short, he's thin, whatever. I thought he was the best wide receiver based on athleticism, route running, yak. I mean, little dude be damned. He was doing things. So he was a first-round pick last year. He was my favorite. Last season he had 77 receptions, 858 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns. I believe he is the wide receiver 1 here. I actually wondered why he wasn't such a bigger deal last year, and I had to go back and remember OBJ. OBJ was listed as the wide receiver 1 last year. Kind of forgot about that quickly. Rashod Bateman is the number 2 wide receiver here. He re-signed this offseason for a team-friendly deal. Good for the Ravens. I wasn't sure if he was going to do that or not, but it's good for the team. Maybe he thinks he can still pop here, and I would love to see that. He was a former first-round pick himself, but he sure hasn't produced like it. I don't think anyone was expecting a first-round pick to not top 500 yards. I mean, he did slightly in his rookie season, but not since. He's never come close to 1,000 yards. So, and if you take a wide receiver in the first round, you'd like to think that they can. So Bateman has been a little bit of a disappointment, but maybe he can break out a little more this year. It would be nice to see. It's also a problem maybe of the offense too. Maybe it's not just Bateman's fault, although I think Zay Flowers is already doing more. Because this is a run-heavy offense, because they target Mark Andrews so much. But now they've got Zay Flowers, who, for whatever reason, can do more. I mean, I just think he's better. But what's left for Bateman, I guess, is the problem I have for something like fantasy. You got run first, Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers. How much can you depend on Bateman for anything, really? So, third wide receiver, Nelson Agholor, 31 years old. Good depth receiver, finally, I think. He was a huge disappointment for the Eagles early on. Dropped everything. Now he seems to make the occasional splash play for the Ravens, just here and there. Nothing you can count on, but he'll get a touchdown here or there or a deep ball. I still think he's good for the team. Devontez Walker is another wide receiver here. He was taken in the 4th round this year out of North Carolina. He's got the ideal size and the ideal speed for the position. He had decent college production, and the camp reports have been pretty good so far. I like a lot here for him, but I also don't expect much for him. Not for fantasy, not for even deep dynasty. I don't think he's going to slowly rise over the next few years to be a thing, at least not for the Ravens. Maybe years from now, if he transfers teams, he'll be a wide receiver too for somebody, but because of this offense, for the same reasons I gave for Bateman. But I like that they have him. I like they picked up a wide receiver for Lamar. They should always kind of be looking to stock the cupboards with the next guy. The next wide receiver they have is Tylan Wallace, who's really more just of a depth guy as far as I'm concerned. Punt returner. He's not a bad player, but he doesn't pop athletically, and he's just kind of a guy. And then the 6th one they kept 6 is Deontay Hardy, who's a special teams weapon, and I do like him for that, so I'll talk more about him later in special teams. The practice squad is surprisingly filled with wide receivers, considering that they don't seem to put quite as much emphasis on wide receiver as I think they could. They got Keith Kirkwood, Dayton Wade, who was kind of a UDFA name of note. Anthony Miller's still kicking around, and former quarterback turned wide receiver Malik Cunningham. So I don't expect anything out of those guys, but they're on the practice squad. Tight ends. Mark Andrews, injured last year, cracked his fibula on a hip drop tackle. Those are banned now, although I don't know how much they're going to enforce that this year because of all the mechanics involved. There's like 4 or 5 things you have to see to call, and we'll just see what that does. Seems more like a penalty after the fact, maybe after the game and people getting fined or penalized, but during the game, I don't know how much we see it. Either way, he's back from that, and then, of course, got into a car accident earlier in August, which was apparently a very serious car accident, but he wasn't uninjured because seatbelts, man. Seatbelts, people. So he's back practicing. He perennially straddles 1,000 yards receiving. What else is to say? The offense often goes through him. He's high volume. He's got 100+ targets like every year, about 7 touchdowns. And he's 27 or 29 years old now, but that doesn't worry me at this point, especially for the position. Isaiah Likely is the backup or number 2 tight end. He's only 24 years old, and I guess I just need to come clean and say I was too low on him coming out of college because he seems like he's been really good for the Ravens, especially when they don't really hit a lot of the peripheral wide receivers as much as I would expect. Likely has athleticism and has the ability to soak up some of those targets. He's fantastic, and they seem to love him. The number 3 tight end, I still believe in, Charlie Kolar. He's a 4th-round rookie pick from the same draft as Likely. I think he went just a few spots before him, and I really liked him coming out of college. He's huge. He has great metrics. He has not been a factor in the NFL at all. Some of that is because he missed time in 2022 for a sports hernia surgery. I don't know that he'll ever be anything in the NFL still, but I love that he's still with the Ravens. Not that they should cast away a 4th-round pick from just a few years ago, but not everyone keeps 3 tight ends on the roster, and I love that they still like him and believe in him. He bulked up a little this offseason. He's probably going to be used more for blocking, but I still think he has potential. It's very possible that if he was on another team, he would be their tight end too. Maybe more. But I think it says a lot about how they invest in the tight end position at the Ravens, so good for them. They also have on the practice squad a tight end named Kadir Ishmael, and I know nothing about him. The O-line. Okay, so the O-line is, as it stands, it's written as Ronnie Stanley, Andrew Voorhees, Tyler Linderbaum, Daniel Falil, and I'm assuming based on what I last saw, Roger Rosengarten. It could be Patrick Markary. I've seen it listed both ways now. I assume that Roger Rosengarten is the right tackle. And he's a 2nd-round rookie pick out of Washington. I never really like to see rookies on the offensive line their rookie year. I would prefer they take a seat, but he's apparently very good, so maybe it works out okay. If it doesn't, they're going to just swap him out. So, but that's 3 of 5 new starters for the Ravens, and that's the thing that concerns me too about that front line, especially with Lamar, who has had, I think, a little more consistency recently with his front line being better, but in the past, not so much. It's kind of like Russell Wilson there, like forced to scurry a bit more than you would want. So there's questions about the line this year and how they're going to gel together, who's going to be where. You want to see them play well as a unit, not just individually. So GM Eric DaCosta has questions too. He thinks he's all set up and that the line will be in a great place next year, which is nice to hear, but that was a strange thing for him to say this year, almost like he was kind of saying, they play the Chiefs in a day. So Tyler Linderbaum also is back after missing some practices for a neck injury. So hopefully that's all good. Defense, they are a 3-4 defense. Starting lineup, is not that much different than last year. So there should be some very good continuity personnel-wise, which is what you'd want to see because they have a new defensive coordinator. So defensive line, Justin Madubuike just signed a big fat contract. 4 years, $98 million, $75 million of which was guaranteed. Good for him. 26 years old. Last year, he was 12th overall in tackles and 4th in sacks. So he played 17 games, 2 years in a row now, so that's good. And his numbers have gotten better every season. Broderick Washington is in his 5th year in the league. He was a 5th-round pick. He's signed through 2026. He's 27 years old. Michael Pierce is the nose tackle. He's 31 years old, still playing very, very good. He's a better run stopper, obviously, than a pass rusher due to the nature of the position and his massive size. But he had a sack last year, and he had 37 tackles. The Ravens gave him another 2-year deal, so he needs to be involved. He's still playing at a very high level. But there's also Travis Jones. He is in he's a 3rd-round pick going into his 3rd year. He played less than 40% of the defensive snaps so far in his career. So there have been maybe some question marks about him. However, earlier this summer, they brought in competition for Jones, and it seems like he just flat out won that. So he's going to be rotating in They actually expect him to play a lot this year, and some are predicting a breakout. His PFF or PF grade has improved every season, and he's one to keep an eye on, I think, in deep dynasty leagues where you need to play a defensive tackle. Inside linebackers, Roquan Smith. 2 years ago, I can't believe it's been 2 years already, was traded from the Bears. They gave him a 5-year, $100 million contract, and all that's been good for is about 160 combined tackles every year. His sacks were down a little last year. That's fine. Last year he had a game with 21 tackles, and only 2 Ravens have ever done that. Him and Ray Lewis. Also, he's the first defensive player to get to 20-plus tackles in 2023. So absolutely worth it. He's still a stud. The other inside linebacker of note is Trenton Simpson. Now that Patrick Queen is gone, it's Trenton Simpson time. He's a third-round pick out of Clemson from last year. His PFF grade, he was graded 4th best linebacker in the 2023 draft last year. Pro Football Network had him as the 2nd. I had him as the 3rd. So not a huge discrepancy between people who know what they're talking about and me. Athletically, he is very gifted. He's comped to Devin White. He's a very, I don't want to say freak athletically, but he's pretty close. He can go sideline to sideline. He's got tons of speed, tons of range. Last year, he did not get involved much. I don't think they just didn't really need him to when Queen was playing well, but they had 13 tackles, 1 sack. So not a lot of playing time, but the potential is kind of all we have to go on for this year. But they slotted him right in to start. So I think he's got really good IDP potential for fantasy. He's going to be really good for the Ravens. They also have Malik Harrison and Chris Board. Outside linebackers, where I think there are a lot more question marks at outside linebacker. There's a ton of guys, and any number of them could step up, but Adafe Owe, I knew I'd say it right eventually. First round pick in 2021, in his 4th year, but his 5th year option was already picked up, which is a little curious. He is another athletic monster, but the production, I don't think, has been there. Last year he had 20 tackles, 5 sacks. He finished 4th on the team in sacks. I still don't really know what to make of him. I know he's good. I know he's got potential, but I don't know where he's at. So he's only 25 years old. This is going to be an important year to get to know him, I think. Even though they already exercised his 5th year option. I feel like we're really going to find out who he is this year, and hopefully for the future. They also have Kyle Van Noy. Ravens signed him. He's 33 years old. It's, I think, a 1-year, potentially 2-year deal, but they're not. They don't have to keep him for both years, really. I don't know what he's got left, being 33 years old. But last year he had 30 tackles and 9 sacks, so seems like he's still pretty good. And I like that they have another vet paired on the other side of Trenton Simpson. So you got Roquan Smith, Trenton Simpson, Kyle Van Noy. I like that there's a lot of experience there to go with the young guy that they expect to step up. David Ojabo is another guy here. He's a 2nd-round pick from 2 years ago out of Michigan. Very athletic as well. Typical Raven. Very little playing time. He had a number of injuries. He had an ACL tear last year, Achilles the year before that at his pro day. Was listed as a raw prospect, came to football late. Some are predicting a breakout for him too. Not me. Again, show me. But to be clear, I'm not giving up on Ojabo as a player. He'll have opportunities this season. I'll put it that way, and he can take advantage of them. But long term, he needs to stay healthy. And he needs to contribute now, or he's just going to get passed. I think that's kind of the thing that I'm more concerned about here, is there are other guys here that are also very good, and he could get passed on this depth chart in time. So let's take a look at 2 of the guys that could do that. First one up is Tavius Robinson, 4th-round rookie from last year out of Ole Miss. He played Last year, 335 snaps, 26 tackles, 1 sack, the most snaps of any rookie Ravens defender. The production doesn't sound like much, but he was actually playing behind Jadeveon Clowney. So it was decent production. Go watch tape of him, and he will take off laterally and chase down Derrick Henry. So he's pretty impressive, actually. You can watch him win off the line with his hand skills or juke a lineman and put a big hurt on Joe Burrow. Dude's a player. This offseason, he added 10 pounds. I assume that's muscle, not just like back fat or something weird. He's been working with Trenton Simpson a ton. He's been watching The Simpsons a ton. That's always good. And then there's also Adisa Isaac, who is a third-round pick out of Penn State. Last year, he had 37 total tackles, 7.5 sacks. So I think he was overshadowed by another fellow teammate. I think it was Chop Robinson. But Adisa Isaac he had good production. He has good metrics. He's a good player too. I don't expect him to be a factor in his rookie season because of the depth here and how the Ravens tend to slow roll some of their rookies at that position. But he's also currently dealing with a hamstring injury, I believe. But we'll see where that goes. When it comes to the linebacking room, and especially the outside linebackers, I don't think there are any scrubs here. There are question marks, but there's a lot of people with a lot of athleticism and talent and ability to step up. So for the future, I think it's a very good possibility that Kyle Van Noy is gone after this year. So we need to see something this year from Ojabo. Who knows about the draft or free agency, but there are opportunities here for both Robinson and Isaac. If you're looking ahead for an IDP stash, there's a couple of guys here worth trying to put away on your teams. This is a strong group with a ton of upside. Cornerbacks. There's a ton of youth here, and again, athleticism and upside. Marlon Humphrey, cornerback 1 here when healthy. He's the old man at 28 years old. He's got 2 years left on his deal, although they have an out at any point. He's still performing at a high level when healthy. He's a Pro Bowl cornerback. He's slimmed down to 190 pounds. He's had some injuries to deal with recently, foot surgery, calf strain. The future is murky. Ravens have stocked up on the cornerback cupboard behind him. They seem prepared, which is probably good. No matter how he plays, it's probably a good idea. Brandon Stevens is their other corner, 26 years old. Little bit of an enigma to me because he was previously at UCLA. He was a running back. Then he moved to corner. Last year, he was listed as the backup free safety, talked about being a nickel corner, and then he became a full-time starter at cornerback. So had a bit of a breakout season. Seems like a pretty good player. I don't know how this season's going to go or how they're investing in him, but the potential is there. Last year, he had 74 combined tackles, 2 interceptions, and he was matching up with guys like Amari Cooper and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So, he didn't get beat. He's a little handsy for a corner, but maybe that's what you like in a good Ravens cornerback too. He didn't get caught. He got away with it. So as long as he doesn't get penalty flags for that, keep it up, you handsy little guy. He's in a contract year. He is looking for an extension. And if you're a Ravens fan, you got to hope that he gets it because that means he played well this year. There's also Ardarius Washington. Our lads has him listed as the nickelback. I don't believe that. But he's also listed as the backup safety, which makes a little more sense to me. Maybe filling the void left by Geno Smith, who left the team this offseason. Then there's Nate Wiggins, who's a first-round pick out of Clemson. I thought he was the third best cornerback in this draft, and he was the third drafted cornerback in this draft. So that all made sense to me. He's a bit of a thin frame at 173 pounds, or at least that's what he was listed at coming out. So you'd like to see him bulk up, but he's got crazy speed, like crazy speed. So that's pretty cool to see, to know that he can scream down the field with the likes of maybe Tyreek Hill or somebody. No clue what he's going to be in his rookie season, but I absolutely love Nate Wiggins as a first-round pick for the Ravens. If there's another one I like as much or maybe more, It's cornerback TJ Tampa, who is a 4th-round pick out of Iowa State. If there was anybody outside the first 3 rounds as a corner that I was going to be screaming for any team, it's TJ Tampa. Dude is a bricklayer. I love watching his tape. He is very physical, and a lot of people say this guy feels like a Raven. Pro Football Focus listed him as the biggest steal from day 3 of the draft. And I expect nothing from him as a rookie too, but I just love that they have him. I don't know when he'll see the field, but I think he's an awesome cornerback. I think he's good for the Ravens. And then there's Jalen Armour-Davis, 4th-round pick from 2022. He's got tons of speed. And Arthur Millette is on IR. Safeties. Kyle Hamilton, huge piece for the D. That sounds weird. Key for taking on guys like Travis Kelce, I think. Makes me think back to big deal safeties like Cam Chancellor and the likes that you need to match up chest-wise with guys like Travis Kelce. Hamilton is awesome. He's ridiculously huge and good, and he's coming into his own. Last year, he had 81 combined tackles, 4 interceptions. The pick 6 he had last year against Watson alone, I mean, he tipped it to himself and then walked in. Was baller. It was awesome. Marcus Williams is another one here. He missed a lot of time over the last 3 years, injured his hamstring, his pec, his wrist. He's listed as healthy now. If he's healthy and he's playing, I mean, no reason to doubt him. But they also brought in Eddie Jackson for some backup. He is now 30 years old, joined on a 1-year deal, formerly of the Bears. He's just tons of experience, and it's good to have him in the secondary. There's also Sanusi Kane, a 7th-round pick out of Purdue from this year, and Bo Braid, who is a UDFA out of Maryland. Special teams kicker is Justin Tucker, because we all know that. He's been there forever. He's probably the best kicker in football. Punter is Jordan Stout still. Hard to evaluate punters based on numbers because of the opportunities given, but there's a couple of things I tried to look at to evaluate him. Last year, he had 66 punts, which is average versus the league. He averaged nearly 50 yards a punt, which is fine. His longest punt was 67 yards. He had 28 punts down inside the 20. That's 12th best in the league. And that feels like the most important metric to me. You want to pin him back. So I don't need you to have the strongest leg. I just need you to be good at flipping the field and giving a good advantage to your team or putting your defense in the best position against their offense. And then finally, kick returners. Deontay Hardy, new to the team. He was with the Bills last year. They also have kick returners listed as Justice Hill and Tylan Wallace. And I know Tylan Wallace had a nice game against the Rams. That's actually the one I went to last year, where he kind of helped win that one for him. But I think Deontay Hardy is a huge upgrade and a big weapon for them. And the evidence, maybe we shouldn't just point to one game, but last year his 96-yard punt return for a touchdown against the Dolphins was amazing. It was game-changing practically, and Hardy is a huge weapon. It's great for the Ravens. That being said, that's all that can be said. That's the Ravens. So I'm not going to make a win-loss total guess for the team, but playoffs are obviously expected. Super Bowl is obviously expected. And they play the Chiefs to start this season, so go Ravens. So thanks again for watching this Ravens edition of Shut Up Football. A very long edition, not typically this long for my show. But we'll see you in the next one. And here comes the season. Peace!